we need to get to work, man.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Without any further ado, bringing in the man himself, the
Let's
boss
get it.
horse, Easy E, Eric Bischoff. Welcome back, brother. Eric, are you there? Do apologize. We're dealing with some
live radio.
technical stuff. Okay, I'm sorry. Here we go. Bringing in right now, live. The man himself, Easy E, the boss horse, Eric Bischoff. Welcome back, man.
Thank you very much. It's great to be with you guys, as always.
Yes, it is.
My man.
I just want to mention, Eric, for some reason, this is number 3, part 3, the trilogy, have you on the show. For some reason, there's a phone number that always calls when you're on the air, but the fan never wants to answer. And I'm trying to figure out who this person is. So does anybody, Eric,
I'm not sure I can help you with that.
I may have a clue or two.
And I was just looking at the board. Our board, of course, is filling up with tons of fans of one that's definitely listening and want to ask you a lot of questions. But Eric, how you been? How things been going on your side?
Really good. It's been a busy month since I spoke to you guys last, and in a great one. It's a great time of year out here in Wyoming, and I've had a chance to come out to New York and spend 4 or 5 days there on business, and had some things going on here at the house that have been really fun, and it's been a great month. I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yes, it is.
Wonderful.
Yes, it is. Good to see you again, Eric. I know we talked off air, and I definitely put over your nice big old chair that we also on WWE Network talking about the Nitro when you gave your commentary, and of course we saw your show you on the network with JBL, so we definitely enjoyed that.
Yeah, the JBL interview was it was a lot of fun for so many reasons. One is I've always I never really knew JBL too much. I mean, I had talked to him a little bit while I was running WCW, and it was a brief kind of passing thing. Never really had much of a conversation or a chance to get to know him. But after I got to WWE, there were just certain people that I clicked with, and JBL was one of them. I just always got along with him. And so when they called me and said, "Hey, JBL wants you to, do the first show," and kind of told me a little bit about it, I said, "I'm in. Cool. If it's JBL, I'll do it." And so I went into it with no real expectations, other than I was going to sit down with somebody that I knew quite well and respected. And it turned out to be one of the better interviews I've ever done, really, on camera. It was a great experience.
Yes, it is. We definitely did enjoy it. That being said, title, Eric, we came up with Throwing Snowballs in Hell. And reason why is because Eric liked the title too. Because, of course, we're going to be covering your WWE run. Of course, the night, infamously, when you came on Raw with Vince McMahon, was the night they called When Hell Froze Over. So if you don't mind telling us briefly the beginning stages of how that came about when you joined the enemy, if you will, Vince McMahon in WWE.
Yeah, well, at that time, obviously the fans still perceived us as enemies, but clearly the WWE had won the war. Vince McMahon had won the Monday Night Wars and, bought out WCW. So there really was no, enemies, involved. It was, he won, I lost. I was off doing my thing, and he was, the conquering hero. But the truth is that the WWE had called me about a year earlier and asked me to come in. In fact, I think it was almost exactly a year earlier. And they called right around the 4th of July. In fact, I had a house full of guests who had, every year we have kind of a big deal out here, and it's a combination of a family reunion, and my wife's birthday is the 4th of July. It's the 4th of July.
Oh, wow.
My father passed away on the 4th of July. So there's just a whole lot of things that, the 4th of July represents to us. So and as a consequence, we've been doing this now every year for 10, 15 years. I just had a whole house full of people when I got a call from, and I believe it was Jim Ross who called me. and asked me if I'd be interested in coming in, but it was very short notice. And again, I had a house full of guests that flew in and drove in from all over the country. And I'd been, eating and drinking for about 6 days straight by then, so I was in no condition. I was in no condition. I certainly was not television ready by any stretch of the imagination. And again, with so many people coming out to visit us at that time, there was just no way I could do it. It was a very short conversation, and nothing ever transpired. And as a matter of fact, I remember hanging up the phone and going, "Wow, I'm probably one of the only people that has turned down an opportunity to be in WWE in a long time. They'll probably never call again." And it took them a year before they called again. And when they called this time, it was Vince McMahon calling. And it was just a great conversation. I've talked about it in the past. Vince called, and he was gracious, he was elegant, he was professional, he said all the right things. And when I say that, I don't mean because he was trying to say the right things. I mean, he said what he felt, and it resonated with me because he was being so honest about things. And it took me all of a minute or two to make up my mind that I couldn't wait to work for him and work with him.
All right, thank you for that. Speaking of you drinking, and I know you tend to drink beer at times. Want to give a shout out. We can find it to WrestleZone.com, and we've been getting a lot of tweets as always, questions for you, Eric. And they wanted to know, Eric, when will Buffalo Bill Cody Bear be coming to Florida?
Yeah, Florida is actually, to answer the question, I'm not sure. I would like to hope that in the next 12 months we'll be in Florida or be very close to it, meaning close to being in Florida. But it's hard to say. Florida is a big market for us. People don't realize that there are probably more horses in Florida than there are in Wyoming and Colorado combined. Florida's a big state for producing cattle, and there's a kind of a cowboy culture, Western culture that's pretty, dominant in Florida once you get away from the coastal areas. So there's a big market there for us, and we hope to get there pretty soon. But I'm guessing within the next 12 months.
Okay, thank you for that. Before I turn it over to NSC Gameboy, we're gonna bring in a caller. Right now, bringing in Jizz. Welcome live to Under the Mat Radio with Eric Bischoff.
Thank you. How are you doing tonight, Eric?
I'm doing very well. Thank you, and thanks for calling in.
Thank you. I'm actually a huge fan of yours, first off. I've known you since you started off in the WWE. Recently, during the years, I've gotten to know your WCW career. But anyways, my question is, I know I'm bringing this up way too early in the show, but whose idea was it, creative-wise, for your Eric Bischoff trial gimmick when you were fired?
I don't know. To be honest with you, I wasn't a part of the creative process in WWE, so I certainly don't know, firsthand who came up with it. And this is only a guess, but my guess is it could have been any number of people. Brian Gewirtz was running creative at that time, and he's he's a very good writer. A lot of his stuff ends up being kind of funny, tongue-in-cheek, but, kind of on-the-nose type of humor, which I really enjoy, and I enjoyed, working on anything that Brian, wrote or was involved in creatively. But, beyond that, I don't know. It had... To me, it felt like it had Brian Gewirz's fingerprints all over it, but I don't know that for a fact.
All right.
All right, thanks, man, for calling in.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, man.
Thank you. All right, NSC Gameboy.
Well, Eric, once again, for the third time, thank you so much for coming on the show. I saw your Legends segment with JBL. It was very good video, may I add. My question to you is that in the locker room in the WWE, coming from WCW back then, and getting over the war and everything, and you in the locker room, who did you find that you clicked with very, very well that you probably didn't expect? Which performer back there did you meet and it was just like, wow, that kind of stood out to you?
Oh, I mean, there were a couple people that I got along with really well that just, kind of happened organically. But even with that, when I just mentioned JBL, I get along great with JBL. I get along great with John Cena. There were, times after shows when we'd all go out and grab a couple beers together. And in fact, one of the funniest stories I have that I was involved with was a night that JBL, myself, Gerry Briscoe, and Bruce Pritchard all went out for a couple beers after the show. Well, we went back to the hotel, went to the hotel bar, sat down together. We were all having fun, and as we were having a couple beers, the bartender came over and said, "Hey, it's 2 o'clock in the morning. We've got to shut the place down. And by the way, you've drank all our beer." Yeah, that JBL and John Cena and Gerry Briscoe, they can drink. You know what I mean? I barely had any. They saw that. But as they were closing up, they turned on all the lights, and I don't know who it was. It was probably a combination of Briscoe and Pritchard, because this is their kind of sense of humor. I think it was Gerry Briscoe's birthday. He might have been turned 60 at that time. I can't remember. But it was his birthday, and I kind of jokingly made some kind of joke about maybe I should wrestle him on his birthday, see if he could take me down. That was a big mistake. And, like I've talked about before, I wrestled in high school and for a while after high school, college in between. But I was, at best, like, on a good day, I was a pretty average wrestler. Gerry Briscoe at 60 threw me around like a rag doll. And around my face into the carpet, really, I mean, it was fun. It was all fun. We were having a blast. And he took me down so hard and so fast. And, of course, Pritchard and Cena and Layfield, or John Layfield were having a blast. They were laughing their asses off. So, and I was shocked that he took me down there. I mean, I knew he was going to take me down because Gerry Briscoe's, he was a prolific amateur wrestler. And even, in his 40s and 50s was working out with his high school and college, friends and so forth. So he stayed physically active. So I knew he would take me down, but I thought I'd last a little longer than I did. So I immediately got up and said, "Man, I bet you couldn't do that again." And that kind of pissed him off a little bit, in a fun way, but it turned up the aggressiveness a little bit. And he came in, and once again, he took me down again, only this time he made me pay a little bit and really rode me pretty hard and kind of muscled me around into the carpet. Of course, I got up laughing, and everybody had a good time, and we finished our beers and went to our rooms. Well, I got up the next morning, and I had a broken finger. I didn't even know I did it until I woke up in the morning, and it was, as big as a pickle, and I couldn't move it. And I went, wow, that's actually, I think it was my left thumb. That's what it was my left thumb. And I got up laughing, going, man, I'm never going to challenge Gerry Briscoe again. That was a mistake. But, there were guys like that, Layfield, Cena, were probably the only guys I really hung out with, and even that was very, very rare. For the most part, I kind of stayed to myself and by myself. I got along with Bruce Pritchard really well. He wasn't a wrestler. He had, was a character at one point. But Bruce and I, even though Bruce was, at the time during the Monday Night War, Bruce was, arguably one of Vince's, right-hand men, and very involved in a lot of things that WWE was doing to counter what we were doing. And in fact, I think Bruce Pritchard had a pretty big hand in the DX invasion, was instrumental in pulling all that off. So while everybody would think we wouldn't get along, he was the guy that I got along with probably the best, and we're still friends to this day. I just talked to him yesterday. So,
wow, that's great.
I ended up, making a lot of friends there. Not a lot, but I guess by my standards a lot, because I don't keep a Rolodex full of people that I consider friends. But, there's still people there that I talk to this day that I didn't know before I got there, and I'm grateful for that.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you for
it. Is.
Tech.
Go ahead, Shin-Blade.
Hey, Eric. How's everything going in Wyoming so far?
So far, so good, my friend.
Well, my question to you is that during your run in WWE, you had a co-general manager role with Stone Cold Steve Austin, and from the looks of things, you guys had a blast of being together. Now, I want to ask you, what is the funniest moment that you have ever had with Steve Austin during that time, on and off camera?
I can't remember one. I can't remember the funniest, and it's not like Steve and I, we weren't close. Once we left the arena, and we got our business out of the way. We would occasionally, we'd sit down after the show if we were happen to be in the same hotel, and we happened, at the end of the night, decide to have a beer before we called it a night. I've sat and had a couple of beers with Steve or a burger with Steve, a few times while we've been out on the road together. But we didn't hang. We weren't that kind of close. But you're right when you say it seems like we had a ball working together, because we did. And it was just the chemistry. First of all, I think a lot of it has to do with Steve's just ability. He's one of those guys that I think could probably work with just about anybody and make it look fun. He's got a wicked sense of humor and a great sense of, comedic timing, along with all of the credibility and muscle, if you will, his character brings to the table. So he can be pretty improvisational and make almost anything work. I like to think I'm the same way. I can. Well, I'm a different kind of character than Steve. My character doesn't bring a lot of muscle to the table, but I can be a smart ass. I can be the fall guy. I can be the straight guy. I can shift on the fly pretty well. So it was so easy for us to work together that it was fun. I mean, we kind of each got into our roles, and we knew what we were trying to accomplish, and we were improvising, or improving most of the way. And it was just a blast to be able to work like that.
Interesting. Thank you for that answer. Excuse me.
Yes, I thought it was interesting to see you work with Stone Cold around that time, of course, because we know the history of, you talked about before, of you working with Steve back during the WCW days. So I thought you two had great chemistry, having co-general managers at that time. I thought it was very funny.
It was fun. It was a fun period of time to be there. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I think Steve had fun too.
Yeah, I think he did. I'm pretty sure if he didn't, I'm pretty sure you would know, or he would make it known. All right, we have a caller, John from Los Angeles. Welcome to you, Under the Mat Radio. I'm sorry, Tony.
Hello, Eric?
Yeah, Tony.
Oh no, Tommy. Hey, how are you? How you guys doing?
Good.
Hey, how you doing, man?
Hey, Eric. I have a question, and it has to do with the sort of production quality that kind of existed when you compare WCW versus WWE in terms of presentation and how both companies approached the presentation of wrestling. When can wrestling have almost a little bit too much polish? Because I always felt WWE, as far as camera cuts go and how steady cameras were, it always felt very cinematic. And obviously it's grown exponentially over the course of the last 15 years. WCW had a little bit more of a raw kind of a feel to it. It had a little bit of a different energy to it. Can you kind of speak on the differences, sort of, in how WCW compared to WWE, especially during the Monday Night Wars?
That's a really, really great question. There was a difference, and even today, the WWE. One of the things that got WWE to the dance, and I'm talking, way before the Monday Night Wars. I'm talking about the '80s and the early '90s. Many people consider the 80s, the really big wrestling boom, because that's when Vince McMahon, went from being, he kind of decided, that he didn't want to be a part of the territory system, that he was going to take his show national, that he was going to, partner up with people like MTV and NBC. And I don't know this. I've never had this conversation with Vince. I can only surmise that, Vince believed that in order to elevate the genre, the business, the way he wanted to be perceived as a national kind of televised product as opposed to the regional studio product that existed in the past, he was committed, I think, to a much, much higher level of production values from the very beginning. And as you pointed out, rightfully so, that those production values, just kept, growing exponentially year after year after year after year. So by the 90s, it was until to this day, I'm still amazed when I watch a Monday Night Raw or a pay-per-view, because now I know how much goes into it and how much money, the quality of the production team that you need to have. I mean, I know what it takes to pull it off. And I watch a Monday Night Raw or a pay-per-view, and I think to this day there's probably not too many people better at producing a live event than WWE. At WCW, we went from being, running on fumes to a large degree when it came to production, because there just wasn't budgets for it based on the scope of their business throughout the early 90s and even right, before I launched Nitro, that we had to grow into a better production value. We knew if we were going to run up against WWE that we couldn't look as bad as we used to look in the past. So we upped our game, but we didn't up it to the level of sophistication and gloss, as you said. We didn't up it to that level, not because we didn't want to necessarily, but we just couldn't do it, overnight. It took us a while. And in that process, I think, not intentionally, but in the process of going from where we were pre-Nitro to where we were a year or two after Nitro, started really getting popular, even at our peak, we weren't quite where WWE was, but as a result of that, we kind of found that gritty middle that, gave us the look and the feel of a sophisticated live event production, large crowd, great lights, multiple cameras. We had like 10 camera shoots, 11 camera shoots, great lighting. We had all the bells and whistles, but it still had that kind of unrefined edge to it.
Absolutely. And
I think it's that unrefined edge that subconsciously made people feel like it was just a little more, I don't want to say real, but it was just a little more, it just felt a little more alive. Honestly, the WWE, and this is not a critique, so please don't anybody take it as such or repeat it as such. But even to this day, when I watch a Monday Night Raw, if I didn't know it was live, I would be convinced it was taped. That's how well done. That's how well done it is. But the downside of being that well done is that it loses its energy to it. It's very subtle. It's very, very subtle. Viewers aren't sitting at home going, "Wow, this is produced so well that it doesn't feel live." I don't mean that. But deep down, subconsciously while they're watching, it's hard to achieve that sense of anything can happen if it feels like it's so glossy that nothing's ever going to go wrong. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, and I think if maybe it's not a criticism that you want to make, I'll make it on maybe not on your behalf, but at least my behalf. When I watch it, it does feel a little bit too much polished. Everybody would like to strive for the production value that I think a WWE is able to provide, but when I watched WCW during the Monday Night Wars and what you guys were able to achieve production-wise, it almost felt like you said, it was something that you created an environment where anything could happen, or at least that's the way it came across, and that's why it almost felt like it was a conscious decision to go that route, because being that it's wrestling and you're kind of dealing with like these outlaws and there's a fight happening. You don't want it to feel too scripted, and that was always my criticism during that time. I always said WWE feels a little too scripted for me, and I kind of like that sort of like raw, anything can happen kind of feeling that WCW has, and that's why I always felt it was more intentional, but yet at the same time I could see how somebody on the production end of it would say to themselves, we want to strive for what WWE has, but when you take the product into consideration, I could see somebody, the product of wrestling, I could see somebody saying to themselves, that's maybe not the best route to take, but, who am I to say? Obviously, WWE is still around, but yeah, it's more my taste more than anything else. I really like what it is that you guys did at WCW.
And I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this. I know not all wrestling fans are interested in television production, but it is an important part of, when you look at the context of, what happened back then and what's going on right now. The presentation of the product is critical to that discussion. People tend to want to talk more about the backstage relationships and, funny stories or, tense moments. And there's some of that to talk about, but the real fascinating part of the business, even to this day, for me, is watching how all television products adapt to the marketplace. And if you go back to the 90s before reality television. Now, I'm in the reality television business, okay? It's how I pay my bills to this day. Right. And nobody wants to call it reality television anymore, so now they refer to it as unscripted because it doesn't have as much of a stink on it as reality shows. But, when you produce a show now in the unscripted genre, you'll notice that, a couple of years ago, they were very constructed. Reality shows were very, very pre-constructed. They weren't scripted, but you produced them in such a way that they were very formulaic. And that went on for a couple of years because it's easy, and it was producing results. But after a while, they quit producing results. And now if you're watching unscripted television now, it almost tends to be more documentary style. And I think the reason that style of presentation in the unscripted genre still continues to grow and to be successful is because it feels real. In its own way, it feels like anything can happen simply because it's not overproduced.
Absolutely.
And back in the 90s, when there was no reality television, professional wrestling was alternative television. As reality is often referred to in the industry. When people in the television industry talk about or write about reality television, they more often than not refer to it in the general sense as alternative television. Well, wrestling was, sports entertainment was, the alternative television of the 90s. And I think one of the reasons our alternative television kind of set the tone in the mid-90s and even in the late 90s was because of that edgy, anything can happen feel that we intentionally created. Not necessarily by the production value, that was a part of it, but just the way we approached every show. And that was one of the things on a previous show I think I talked about here. The research that we did before we launched Nitro, screamed at us a couple different things. One of the things that it screamed at us most loudly from the viewers that we did focus groups with was that they wanted that sense that anything can happen. So that was right at the front of our checklist. Every time we produced a show, we were looking for the elements within that show, or even in some cases the moments in that show that felt like it was completely unscripted and wasn't supposed to happen. That was the beauty of that format.
Thank you for that. Tommy has been great. Thanks for the call. Keep listening, man.
Hey, I appreciate it, Eric. Thanks for everything. Thanks, guys.
You bet.
No problem. All right, you feel like taking a couple more calls?
Absolutely. That's what I'm here for, man.
Yeah. Okay. Welcome to you, Under the Mat Radio, Malik.
How y'all doing?
Doing good.
Yeah, going good.
All right.
Going fine.
How you doing, Mr. Bischoff? It's an honor to talk with you.
I'm having a great night, Malik. Thanks for calling. I appreciate it.
Okay. Hey, I'm actually calling from my computer on a Google Hangout. I got a couple of friends who want to ask you questions. I'm on with Dark Horse and a guy named Leon.
Great.
Okay. Yeah, good.
Well, my question for you, Eric, is do you think compare TNA to WCW production-wise, do you think TNA is on WCW level production-wise? Because a lot of people would say that they are, but me personally, I always thought that WCW produced their shows much better than TNA ever has.
Good question.
You can't really compare because it's apples and oranges, really. Nitro was a live 2-hour major arena, touring event show. TNA is produced or was produced or still is, I'm not even sure, inside of a soundstage. They didn't have nearly the equipment. They didn't have the lighting. They didn't have the crowd. They don't have, it's two different things. And it's not fair to say one's better than the other. They're just different than each other. I couldn't really take anybody seriously that would suggest that the production values as a whole on TNA are anywhere remotely close to what Nitro was, just simply because they were two different products.
Okay, Malik, you had another question?
And I also want to ask one more question, then I'll be done.
Sure.
Because you were there with TNA, what do you think TNA could have done differently to have maybe been competition to WWE?
That's an entirely different show, and to be honest with you, I'm currently in litigation with that organization, so I'm going to limit what I'm willing to say or discuss to probably what we've discussed thus far. Really don't want to get into a TNA discussion at this point.
Okay. Thanks, Malik, for calling in, man.
Malik, host, I have a question for Eric Bischoff. Today's WWE product, do you think or would you agree or disagree that the product now is basically not as exciting as it once was? I mean, personally, I think it's not exciting. There's nobody on the show that's exciting. The shows are bad. And also, as far as Sting, who you're probably very, very close with in a lot of ways, do you think WWE should not have, booked him the way they have booked him? Because personally, I don't think he should have lost at WrestleMania. That's in my opinion. I think they're trying to bury him a little bit, and also Vince's ego trying to bury WCW all over again. What do you think?
I don't agree with that, to be honest with you. I have there's not many people in the industry that I have more respect for than Sting. But that being said, Sting is, he's winding down in his career. He hasn't had a lot of ring time. He's 50 plus years old. This is not, I think Sting had a phenomenal opportunity to be able to get out in front of a WWE audience at WrestleMania and be a part of something that, while I haven't talked to him about it, I'm absolutely certain it was one of the biggest moments in his professional career. He recently had an opportunity to get in the ring again in a very meaningful way with the top talent in WWE. So I think if I'm guessing that Sting is completely satisfied with the opportunity that he's had, probably wouldn't want to be able or wouldn't want to, become a part of a main event story or even a semi-main event story that required him to go out and tour 250 days a year. He's just past all of that. So it's easy for wrestling fans to criticize or second guess, creative decisions when they don't have all of the information that they would probably need to have if indeed they were really making those decisions. Who knows, and I don't know. I certainly haven't talked to Sting about this or anybody else. But how do we know that Sting didn't really want to be programmed in such a way that his storyline would continue? I mean, he may have. He very well may not have wanted that at his age. I don't know. All I know is he got a hell of an opportunity. He's still there. He'll probably get another hell of an opportunity down the road, and at this stage of his career, I'm pretty sure he's grateful for that.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, that's cool. I just feel as a fan, and a lot of fans, he shouldn't have lost. Because I followed Sting since the UWF days, WCW, of course, and now I know I'm a big Sting fan. I just feel that maybe he should have gotten an opportunity to win at WrestleMania instead of lose.
You know what's funny, and this is kind of like me being, I'm a fan now. Okay, forget about the fact that I was involved in the business, but if you look back, when now I'm going to have to take myself out of that role again and put myself back into the role of the guy that used to run a wrestling company. When I would find, whether I put the belt on Ric Flair, whether I, put the belt on Hulk Hogan or anybody else that, back in the 90s, it was like anybody over 35, put them out the pasture. Don't put the belt on anybody over 40 years old because the young guys need that push. I mean, I've been criticized for a lot of different things, but probably one of the things that I've been criticized most for is putting over the older guys at the expense of the younger guys. But occasionally, now we see when an older guy like Sting now comes up, people are disappointed when he doesn't get over and doesn't get a big push at the expense of the younger talent. So it's a, you can look at it any way you want to, but I ultimately think, WWE probably made the right decision with all of the information they had at their fingertips.
I got you. Yeah, that makes sense,
sure.
I guess.
There's a good point. Malik, thank you for calling and keep listening, okay?
Okay, thanks, buddy.
Thank you, man.
No
I actually agree with that concept too, Eric. With Sting, everybody saw him come back and they thought he was going to make a triumphant return and win over Triple H at WrestleMania. I myself didn't like the second half of the match. I liked the first half. Now, I didn't like the second half of the match as I written an article about how DX and NWO interfered and made it into like old world star hip hop type stuff. Like they were fighting and Kevin Nash blowing his quad after getting hit by Billy Gunn, which Tech and I after Tech and I started laughing because Billy Gunn hit Kevin Nash and he fell and tore his quad. But I honestly was shocked, and I think that's what WWE was trying to do, was shock the world instead of making it too predictable. I wanted to ask you, Eric, what were your thoughts when you heard about Sting having this little stinger partner pun with Seth Rollins during Night of Champions?
Obviously I'm concerned, for Sting at this point. Again, I can't stress enough how important it is. And again, I'm not a wrestler. I've never been a wrestler, so I'm not speaking from a wrestler's perspective. But as someone who's been pretty close to, wrestlers and obviously, extremely close to the business, kind of have a first-hand knowledge of just how demanding and physically tough this industry is. And again, I turned 50 a while back. I know what, even though your mind is willing, and I struggle with this all the time, and I think I joked about it here. My brain still thinks I'm 25. Honestly, my brain still thinks immediately I can do anything that I used to be able to do when I was 25. And then just as often, my body, tells my brain to shut the hell up because it's not true. And my first thought was, knowing how competitive Sting is and how passionate he is and how much pressure he puts on himself, to live up to his own expectations and his own goals, my first thought was, man, I bet you he pushed so hard that he pushed too hard. And I'm hoping that wasn't the case, but I'm pretty sure it probably was.
Thank you for that. Now, of course, I'm going to bring this out because we're getting fans asking this now on Facebook, and then I'll turn it over to NSC Gameboy. Now the topic is Sting. Of course, the big fan match, the big dream match everyone wants to see is Sting versus Undertaker. Some are saying they want to see it at WrestleMania. And now I'm getting questions from fans is they love how the Sting and Hogan build for Starrcade was. The whole year build up and a half. Sting didn't talk and the whole Hogan build up and Sting. They want to know, how would you book Sting versus Undertaker if you had control as the booker for WrestleMania currently right now?
I don't have an answer to that. I mean, you've got two really, really powerful characters with great legacies. You've got a built-in, desire. It is like a match, for obvious reasons. But how I would do it, I have no idea, man. I'd have to sit in a room by myself with a couple really close confidants and that knew what they were talking about, and really spend a week or 2 or 10, trying to figure out what would be best. A lot of it has to do with the availability. And again, I go back. I have no idea how much Undertaker wants to work. I don't know how much he's able to work physically. I don't, who knows? And the same obviously is true right now, especially true right now with Sting. So until you know how much access you have to the talent and what the talent is able to do or willing to do in some cases, it's really hard to sit down and just throw out a creative scenario. I know that I would probably committed to building that story slowly and organically so that build started with things that could be as subtle as a look. Perhaps the Undertaker would shoot to Sting or vice versa in a certain situation, and just let that look and that emotion, let it create questions and doubt in the viewer's mind. Because I firmly believe that if you can get viewers to ask questions, you can get them hooked. So you've got to do little things to make them wonder, are they building a Sting Hulk Hogan thing here, or are these two guys actually now starting to kind of not see eye to eye the way they used to, or whatever your backstory is, build into it slowly so that you create interest in that story organically and you're not shoving it down the throat of the audience. Because I think that's one of the things that I did wrong, quite honestly, and one of the things I think happens today, because there's the pace by which storylines now have to develop because of the way television is produced and the way pay-per-views are produced, and all the different events that go on. Storylines are now being created. Arcs are being created in weeks and months as opposed to quarters or years. And I think that's one of the things that's missing. There's no slow build to anything anymore.
No.
It never has a chance to sink into the audience and grow organically because everybody has to rush a storyline through to get on to the next one. And I think that's one of the things that business suffers from to this day, just because of the sheer volume of it.
True. Then also I think, too, before I turn over to Game Boy, is you got pay-per-views every month, and sometimes WWE had cheap pay-per-views. I don't know what you call them now, because monthly specials, sometimes 2 pay-per-views in 1 month. So instead of having like a good 4 to 5 weeks or 6 weeks like back in the 90s or back in the day we had time to build, now you rushing storylines, you only got 3 weeks to prepare. You've got 3 weeks. You've only got 3 weeks to prepare, or 4 weeks if you're lucky. You've got a television audience that has evolved too. It's not just the sheer volume of the content that you have to produce and the pay-per-views and the scheduling of them. That is one huge amount of the problem. But the other part of the problem is that the television audience's attention span now is, it's not what it used to be. There's so much more available on television now. There's so many different ways to fracture an audience and make it difficult, to capture an audience's imagination, that you almost have to rapid fire things in front of them in order to keep their attention, because nobody has the time as a viewer anymore to really invest in storylines that build slowly. It's unfortunate, but it's a part of not just the wrestling business, but it's a part of the television business. Thank you. That is a good point. That's why we got you. All right, we got you here. Get on through. another question from a fan. I know just to be aware, fans. I know we have tons of callers that's waiting. Please be patient. We're going to try to get to all of you so you can speak to Eric Bischoff. One of my favorite nicknames, and now I get somebody mentioned, is named Phil from Atlanta. Hey, Mr. Bischoff. Back in the Nitro days, I remember one episode where Hogan sometimes referred to you as the Boss Hoss. Was that planned, or was that a random name that Hogan gave you? Thank you.
No, that was completely random, and I don't recall it. But on any given night, he could have called me any number of different things. So Boss Hoss is probably a good one.
I actually like that name. Actually, I remember when the Nitros used to always kiss Hogan on the forehead, and I was like, wow, Hogan never lets nobody do that. And used to do all the segments and whatnot. So thought it was pretty cool. And I always me and NSC Gameboy will always defend you back when we was in school, because people would be like, oh, Mr. McMahon, Mr. McMahon is great. He was like, wait, Eric Bischoff was a character before Vince was a character. No, he wasn't. Kids getting in arguments. I'm like, yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Bischoff
really?
Bischoff was an evil. He was evil before McMahon was an actual character. So we just, kids back in the day used to fuss and fight, and people used to try in school. George NSC Gameboy remember this. I'm Eric Bischoff. I'm Hulk Hogan. I'm Nash, and people used to do their own wrestling moves and jackknife people on grass, and all that good old stuff.
Mm-hmm. So
that was the influence you had, Bischoff, in the NWO on a lot of kids here in Baltimore.
Yeah, well, it's funny. Not only would kids argue about that, but adults still argue about that very thing to this day. I mean, that's, people tend to forget that I was the announcer, owner of the car. In my case, I was the owner. I was the president, but I was the guy that kind of came out from behind the broadcast booth and turned heel and became, a character probably about a year before Vince McMahon did it. So, yeah, I gave him something to shoot for.
I don't know how in the world did you, I guess it's fiction, but I don't know how in the world did you join two guys, even three, after those guys broke your back in Great American Bash 96.
Because money and power mean everything to a guy like the character. and yeah, they beat my ass, but if there was more money and power in the NWO than there was working for WCW, then I'm going with the money and the power lives. That was it.
Yeah.
And by the way, that's not unlike Republican and Democratic politics to this day.
That is true.
They just know where the money is, so it's not like what I did was that far-fetched.
Well, actually, I have a random question that I just got from a fan. Sorry to cut anybody off, but we had a guy on yesterday named Antoine. I think that was correct. And I always wanted to ask you this for the last two shows. Was your theme song in WWE is one of the, I think personally to me, is one of the most catchiest theme songs ever, but I never got your perspective of what you think about that theme song.
Well, first of all, I wrote and sang that song, so of course I love it.
Wow.
Okay, that's BS. I just had to throw that out there to see if I for a split second I thought, I'm going to let that hang there for a few days and see how many people go nuts with that. But
right.
that would be cool.
Did you sing that?
No, I didn't sing it.
Okay.
If I would have sung it, you would know it was me, and it wouldn't be a good thing.
We knew Eric didn't sing it. We knew.
No, I know. It's one of those things where, Marks in wrestling and Smarts would run to the dirt sheets and say Eric Bischoff sang his song. I always see it 200 million times before hitting the bed tonight.
And you're right about that. That's a part of me that wanted to do it, just that activity. But no, it's not true. I didn't have anything to do with that song. They picked it. They produced it. They, meaning WWE, they do a phenomenal job of creating their own music and publishing it. So it's a great song. Seems to have resonated with a lot of people and kind of fit the character pretty well. So I'm happy with it.
Thank you. speaking of Baltimore, I want to give a shout out to our buddy Graham Cawthorn. There's a new book, Eric, that's out. It's called Battleground Baltimore, How One Arena Changed History. This book is really big. It has all the historic wrestling events from the 60s up to recent day, from the WWF, WCW, NWA. A lot of pictures. We've been featured in it. I've been featured in it. And you should know, Eric, that you are on the cover. On the top left-hand corner is you at Nitro with your arms open wide wearing your traditional black shirt. So it started to let you know.
Wow.
Cool. Yeah, on the cover is you. You have Macho King Randy Savage from WWF, Fabulous Moolah, Sting, Ric Flair, Bruno Sammartino. So you made the cover on this book.
Well, great. I'd love to read the book, actually.
Yes, we'll send you the information. We might be able to send you a copy over to you in Wyoming. We can do that. NSC Gameboy?
Oh, cool. Definitely we get on that. Eric, my question to you is, I wanted to know your opinion on a certain name. When you hear the name, I wanted to know what was the first thing that comes to your mind. Shane McMahon. A lot of people in the business right about now has been really missing Shane McMahon's element in the WWE. And your tenure there, what were your thoughts, and what's the first thing that comes in your mind when you hear Shane McMahon?
Energy. I liked Shane a lot. I got a chance to work with him in the ring. Had what I think was a pretty decent match. And I hate to call anything that I performed in a match because it was really more of an exhibition of a match. But I had an opportunity to work with Shane both on television and ultimately on a pay-per-view in the ring. Very physical guy, very high energy, intense, extremely intense, professional, and just a great guy. He was a guy's guy. He was a McMahon, and he took that very seriously. But he was also the kind of guy that you just felt like he'd let his guard down around you, and you'd see the real guy. I really liked him a lot, and I think he brought a lot of energy to the table with WWE. He would do he was fearless. He was physical. He would do anything that he thought would make great television, and I still do to this day. I have a ton of respect for him.
Okay, thank you, Jack.
Yes, we have a couple of Twitter questions. Eric, one from our good old buddy Cheeky. He says, did you get a bonus in your WWE paycheck while you wrestled on pay-per-views?
Oh, God, I don't know. I may have. I'm sure I got some royalties, as far as my participation in that. But I know this sounds crazy, but I never paid too close attention to what I got paid. My contract was my contract. My deal was my deal. And I had full trust and confidence that I was going to be paid according to my agreement. So I never really sat down at the end of every month and reconciled my royalty report with, different things. It's not who I am. So I'm sure if I deserved a bonus or royalties, I'm sure I got them. But I don't recall it, to be honest with you.
All right. We're going to bring in our media assistant, Saltine. Go Saltine, you on live with Eric Bischoff.
Mr. Bischoff, how you doing again?
Outstanding.
Oh, I hear that, my friend. My question for you is, there's been an issue, I think, about a year ago with Scott Steiner. Can you tell us more about that issue between you and him?
I'll touch on it a little bit.
Thanks, Eric.
You bet. Without going into a whole lot of granular detail, because, again, there's litigation involved, and I don't really want to cross any lines I shouldn't cross. But, I think it was a horrible misunderstanding, to be honest with you. I haven't had a chance to talk to Scott about it. I'm sure someday, perhaps, I will. But, the truth is that there was a situation going on creatively that I guess Scott and I think it was James Storm, yeah, neither one of them were comfortable with, and I had James Storm coming to me, and I had Scott coming to me, and then James would come to me, and then Scott would come to me, and then the agent would come to me, and it just kind of went on and on and on throughout the day. And from what I recall, Scott made his point, and I said, great, then you don't have to do it, and we'll come up with something else. Because it was getting late, it was getting close to showtime. Much to the disappointment, I'm sure, of all of the, wrestling fans out there who think that Hulk Hogan and Eric Bischoff had any control over anything in TNA. The truth is we didn't. We couldn't hire or fire anybody. My role there was really more of a consultant than anything else, and I did the best I could with what I had. And they, meaning TNA, could do or not do anything they wanted to do with the effort that I provided. So I wasn't in a role to hire or fire anybody, and certainly not fire Scott Steiner, because somebody up until that evening I considered a friend. I would have had no reason to fire him or want him to be fired. He just didn't like where we were going. I ran out of time. We needed to make a decision, and there were options. So we picked one. Well, shortly thereafter, from what I recall, there was a parting of the ways, and I guess Scott, in his mind, it was my decision or my choice for that to happen, and that Hulk Hogan was involved, and nothing's further from the truth. I never had anything to do with that decision. It was out of my hands, completely out of my hands, contractually out of my hands. But nevertheless, Scott was hot. He was convinced, or probably still is, that I had something to do with that, and that's where it all started. It's unfortunate, like most things, it's poor communication and not having all of the facts that creates, situations like that. But it is what it is. Hello?
Yeah, hello?
Hello?
Yeah. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you now. I must have lost it.
Yeah, I'm thinking we must have had some technical difficulty or something, Eric. Tech, you still there? Tech?
Well, I have a question, if you can hear me.
Okay. Well, go ahead, Shane.
Well, this comes from Daria from Quarter Circle Podcast. I want to send a shout out to her. She had a friend of hers that dearly passed away over the weekend. But Eric, the question is, how did you come up with the idea of dumping the WWF Women's title in the trash can?
Oh God, I don't know. It was a spontaneous thing, I'm sure. It's not like I said that for a couple months to try to think of the most dastardly deed I could do on television. I remember Madusa calling me saying that, she was free and clear and she had the belt, and I talked her into bringing it with her. And then probably talked her into doing something against her will to a degree, or at least her better judgment. But I don't think a lot of time went into it. I think it was just kind of an opportunistic thing that came up within a matter of a couple days, and I thought, hell, this will get people talking. Let's do it. And that's what I did.
All right, can y'all hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right,
yeah.
I do apologize for that.
Now.
Cool. All right, we got a couple of Twitter questions from JNN Jats on Twitter. Said, Eric, do you think WWE should do a WCW reunion show like they did ECW One Night Stands?
No, I don't. Those, in my opinion, just my opinion only, when you see, in your memory, it's like watching your favorite, athletes growing up. You want to remember your favorite NFL guy, NFL player, when they're at the peak of their game. You don't want to see them when they're 60 years old and limping, with bald head. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You want to remember your heroes, people that you've looked up to and admired, within the context of who they were at that time. When you do a reunion show, particularly when you involve people physically, and they're now 10 years older, 15 years older, 20 years older, it never it never meets the expectation or the memories that people have in their minds. So in a way, it's kind of a letdown. Yeah, it's always nice to see people you haven't seen in a long time, and the crowd reacts to them because absence makes the heart grow fonder. It's human nature, and everybody gets that big nostalgia rush. But once the bell rings and then you've got to perform, and you realize that the heroes that you looked up to can't perform to nearly the same level that they used to be able to perform to, it's a little bit of a letdown. Not always consciously, but even subconsciously, it's a letdown. And for that reason and that reason alone, I'm just not a fan of that idea.
Actually, I just wanted to say real quick that I really respect that answer because honestly, some things should just be left to memory.
Yeah, and there's always a way to involve, somebody that's been retired for 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 years. There's always a way to do that. And actually, there's a way to do that and probably get the same bang for your buck in terms of, emotional response and satisfaction and enjoyment from the audience. You can achieve that without necessarily having to involve them physically in a match. A match is one important element, key element within the presentation of sports entertainment. But there are a lot of other pieces that go to supporting that story and that match, that in-ring confrontation. So there's a lot of different kind of co-starring roles, if you will, or support cast, roles that different people can play that don't require them to get in there and do the kind of things that they used to be good at 20 years ago.
It is. I do agree. As much as I would love to have seen the WCW reality show, I'm sorry, but I should say reality show reunion show. Actually, can I think of it? That would be good. Eric, a WCW reality show. That would be cool.
Oh,
like
God.
Scott.
They're doing a couple, so they're heading in that direction.
Oh, okay. You heard it first. Speaking of promos, before we take a couple of calls, is one of my favorite promos we use in WWE was the Survivor Series 02, the bill for the first Elimination Chamber, and he kept saying the ingenious creation. They kept playing it over and over again. And talk about the build of that. Was the match what you thought it was, the Elimination Chamber, and were you a fan of the matches?
Oh, this is probably going to result in me not getting invited to any WWE events anytime in the near future. But, first of all, I want to say one more time, I did not create the Elimination Chamber. That whole concept was developed within WWE and the creative department and a bunch of other people, and I was not even remotely a part of any of those discussions. I was simply playing a character who was taking credit for creating the Elimination Chamber. So I had nothing to do with it. Again, as a fan, and anybody that's ever worked with me, will swear to this, I'm just not a fan of gimmick matches. And I hate to refer to the Elimination Chamber as a gimmick because it's such an extensive, effort and such a big deal. But I like my matches kind of plain and simple. I like to see the story play out in a ring between two people where you're seeing the manifestation of the struggle between good and evil. And the less I have to clutter that story up with weapons and cages and chambers and garbage cans and, whatever kind of, chicanery that people come up with in these gimmick matches, the better. To me, it's always been, gimmick matches to me reflect a lack of creativity. Meaning, and again, it sounds horrible and it sounds like I'm knocking people and I don't mean it to be, but when a story needs a prop, it's probably not that great of a story. And sometimes sometimes you just don't have an epic story to tell. And that's when, you start supporting it with stipulations and or gimmick matches. But I've always struggled to enjoy them meaning gimmick matches, and as a producer and a writer, I've always tried to avoid that crutch as much as I could, because to me they're just not as good.
So with that being said, you not being a fan of Elimination Chamber, would that also equate to you not being a fan of the War Games pay-per-views from WCW?
That's true. I just unless there is a story, and see, that's the key. It's probably one of the reasons why I feel the way I feel. And I'm as much to blame, or maybe more so than anybody. I've done it, so I'm not throwing stones at anybody. I'll throw them at myself. But when you know you have an event and you're going to call that event War Games, and you know what that is, or Elimination Chamber, or any other, 4 sides of death, or 6 sides of death, or 27 sides of death, whatever you're going to call a cage match, okay? If there isn't a story that has built over a long period of time that requires that the end of that story be told inside of a steel cage, or in a War Games format, or in a World War III format, or in any other kind of, I'll call it a gimmick match, if the story isn't there to support the need for the gimmick, then it was an ill-conceived idea. And I think so often those ideas aren't generated organically, or the gimmick match doesn't evolve organically as a part of the story. It's simply, okay, well, we know we're going to have, a War Games match in November, so let's book that. And not enough thought goes into the build-up and the reason for that match ending up in a War Games. Sometimes sometimes I did better jobs at it than others. But more often than not, and particularly, in the last couple of years, not so much in WWE, but, I've seen shows where, every match is a gimmick match. Pay-per-views where every match is inside of a steel cage. Well, why? What's the story? What are the story arcs that have forced that upon the audience, or forced it upon the participants? Where are the stakes? What's going to happen? Who's an advantage? Who's at a disadvantage? Those are all things that if you don't answer those questions along the way, or better yet, create those questions along the way in a disciplined manner, then the match itself is kind of meaningless, except for that it's a spectacle. And that's why they lose me. I just have never really liked them. And I know I'm probably in the minority here, because I know a lot of people do like them. That's fine. Just from my own personal point of view, as a writer and a producer, 75% of the time, there's no real storyline support leading to that big supposed, event. Therefore, the big event doesn't really mean anything to me.
Okay. Good to hear your opinion on that. We'll bring in a caller, 401. Welcome to Under the Mat Radio with Eric Bischoff. Caller, you there? Okay. Everybody know
I must have bored that one to death with my last response.
Wow.
Let's bring in another area code 281 Under the Mat Radio with Eric Bischoff.
Yes, hello. Thank you for taking my call. Thank you, Mr. Bischoff. Just had a quick question. Before the Monday Night War, was there ever an opportunity for WCW and WWE to work together, sort of like a cross-brand event or something along that manner?
No, that would have no.
Wow.
No, that's all I can do. Absolutely not. I can't put it into any clearer context than that. Just flat out no.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Even
thanks
I can
much.
answer that question.
Guy representing from Houston, Texas. Thanks for calling in. Try again, area code, that's Wyoming again, area code 310, On Demand Radio with Eric Bischoff.
Hello?
Yes, you're live. Eric Bischoff, welcome.
Thank you, man.
What's your question? Sorry, we lost him. So, Eric, you might be scaring people away with your... Go ahead.
Actually, I have a question.
Go ahead.
Eric, I want to ask you, this has been going on for almost 2 years now, this January. I never heard of you speak on this, but as far as the WWE is concerned, but what were your thoughts on CM Punk when he walked out?
I really, I don't have any. Well, I guess I do. I'll take that back. Because I don't know CM Punk. I've never met him. I've never had a conversation with him, so I don't know anything about him other than what I've read, and I take all of that with a grain of salt, okay? But when I heard it, my first reaction was, oh, man, here's a guy who, 10 years from now is going to look back and go, damn, I wish I would have handled that different. Because I understand how someone like CM Punk or anybody that works under that schedule and physically through the physical challenges, it's a hard life being a superstar in WWE. It just is, always has been, and I can see how it would wear you down physically and emotionally, and I could see how you would start to feel frustrated or to the point where you just couldn't take too much more. But there are different ways of handling that. And again, I'm not necessarily making commentary on what happened with CM Punk and WWE because, quite frankly, I have no idea what went down there. But I do know when somebody that is able to continue to perform for 2, 3, 4, 5 years or more at the level that CM Punk was at, that's a chance to change your life forever and to change your children's lives forever. And to walk away from that opportunity is something that if I was his older brother or his dad or a confidant, I would have, and not just CM Punk, but anybody, I would counsel them to really take a deep breath, really think about what they're doing and why, and think about the future. Because that's one of the things that, and it's one of the things I think that happens when you're not just in the wrestling business, but when you're in the entertainment business, especially when you're at a high level. All of a sudden, you're making money, you're getting the kind of press, you're getting the exposure, the audience is buying your merchandise, and when that finally happens to you, because you dream about it happening, you work hard to get a chance to make that happen, and then when it finally happens to you, it's very easy to lose sight of the fact that it can disappear just as quickly as it came. Actually, it can disappear a lot quicker than it came, because you have to work to get to that point. But it doesn't take long, and 1 or 2 or 3 bad decisions or bad choices, and all of a sudden, it's gone. And you really don't realize how much you had until long after it's gone. So it's easy when you got a couple $1 million in the bank, or however much money Punk had coming in, or whatever. He strikes me as a guy, based on what I've read, that lives at or below his means and is smart with his money, and I'm really glad to hear that. But at the same time, when you're in a position where you could be pulling down $2, $3, $4, $5 million a year for the next 3, 4, 5 years, and you choose to walk away from that, my guess is that 10 years from now he's going to be looking back and going, man, I wish I would have handled that different.
Interesting.
Thank you for that. Interesting. Now, with Bischoff, you were WCW, of course, AWA, which a lot of people tend not to talk about in WWE. Let us know some of the most intense people you've been around. You worked with Vince. You hear, everybody talk about Vince being intense and being competitive, and you've been around Paul Heyman, and then Stone Cold Steve Austin, and the late, great Randy Savage. Let us know your mindset, some of the most intense workers, either they were wrestlers or even executives that she's been around?
Well, other than the ones you've already mentioned, when I was in AWA, there was a wrestler there by the name of Kevin Kelly. And actually, Kevin worked in WWE as well for a period of time.
Yeah.
Kevin was double tough and triple intense. I mean, he was really, really intense. Rick Rude could be intense. He was a pro. A lot of guys, Bill Goldberg, extremely intense, very volatile guy. But from my perspective, that volatility and that intensity was a result of the fact that they were passionate and they really cared about their character. So I never found it to be a negative necessarily. Sometimes it was challenging and you had to deal with it, had to work around it. You had to be careful about how you approach certain things. But at the end of the day, I'd rather have somebody that was volatile and intense than somebody who was passive and just didn't really care. So I kind of took it as a good thing.
NSC Gameboy?
Well, my next question now is pretty much the present. In the condition in wrestling, a lot of people are saying that they can see the difference happening with Triple H and Stephanie taking over, and the years of wrestling is now becoming a sport where a lot of these small guys are winning championships, and the big man size is kind of going out the door. With a person of your stature who's in the production business and everything, where do you see wrestling itself going, of course, in the next 5 years, production-wise? Do you think that the WWE has pretty much gone as far as they can go, or do you think that there's an avenue out there that no one has tapped into, mainly, I guess, a notion, a feeling within yourself that no one has tapped into that you think that somebody can hit?
Oh, I think there is, and I don't know what it is, or I'd be hitting it instead of talking to you guys on the phone. No offense, but I think somebody will. There's a lot of great minds in WWE that are looking for new ways to present the product. There are a lot of talented people out there outside of WWE who love the product and are looking for a new angle of attack on it. And to bring an element of it to the audience so that there's something new and fresh and vibrant that nobody's seen before. So it's not a question of if it's going to happen, it's when it's going to happen. Television itself has changed so dramatically over the last 12 months it's changed. The industry has changed. That between technology, the change in viewing habits, and the fact that there's a lot of smart people trying to figure out the right thing to do, it'll happen. I wish I knew what it was, but I'm confident that someone will figure it out.
Wow. To piggyback off of that question, I have another one. I know that you've pretty much taken your eye off the product in the last few years. I know you've been doing other things and stuff, and you've kind of gotten away from the business. When we first interviewed you a while back, you once said that you didn't think that no one could take down the WWE at the stature that they are now, the global phenomenon that they become. I want to ask, if that's very well possible, do you think that maybe that the WWE is imploding? Do you think that with Vince, coming, he's an old man. Let's just call it like it is. He's 70 years old. He's an old man. When Vince.
Okay, let's stop right there. I really like and respect you guys, but I'm 60, so you got to be really careful with the whole old man thing. Okay. I'll rephrase it then.
Vince has been letting go a lot of his power and his responsibility to, of course, the staff and his family, Triple H and Steph has really been taking over. My question to you is that once Vince McMahon finally steps down from the WWE, rather it is, however way he does it, do you think that the WWE itself, and this is your opinion now, so I know you can't speak with facts because you're not staff with the WWE, this is just your opinion, and a very highly respected opinion at that, do you think that the WWE can still survive with Vince McMahon gone, out of the mantle? Do you think that they will eventually probably implode, or do you think that maybe a shot in the dark, that it can be even bigger than what they are?
I don't have a crystal ball, but I'll do my best to answer.
I understand.
One is, I think the appetite for sports entertainment, professional wrestling, whatever you want to call it, the appetite for that product is always going to be there. It's been there since the beginning of television content. Wrestling has been on the forefront of syndication long before cable was available in households around the United States. Local wrestling in the territories was the most watched program in every market around the country. When cable came into play in the 80s, professional wrestling, sports entertainment was the most watched program in cable television. Guess what? It still is. When pay-per-view evolved out of cable television, sports entertainment, professional wrestling was the number one rated genre in that category in pay-per-view. Still is to this day, at least in the top 2 or 3. As digital evolved, it became such an important and vital part of the entertainment, platform. Sports entertainment, professional wrestling at the very top of the list worldwide in digital entertainment. So the fact that this business has not only survived but thrived in every single category of entertainment delivery that's ever been invented in the United States, I would suggest that it probably will continue to do so, because the struggle that I talked about creatively when we were talking about gimmick matches, the essence of good versus evil and the stories that play out of that conflict will always resonate with an audience. Now, when you take that cultural kind of factor phenomenon, in my opinion, and combine it with the fact that as a television product, sports entertainment is one of the more economical programs to produce and distribute, that satisfies that need with that audience. So because I think there's always going to be a market for it, and at the end of the day, sports entertainment is one of the most cost-effective ways of telling that story, I therefore think it will always survive. So that's part one of my answer. Part two of my answer, as it relates to WWE and how they're structured, from the 4 or 5 years that I spent there, I would suggest to you that there are many people there who have been there for 5, 10, 15, 20 years or more. In some cases, I know for sure more, outside of Vince McMahon, who bring a wealth of experience and knowledge to the table. I think that Stephanie McMahon, who has grown up in the industry and seen it in one way, shape, or form all of her life, has learned an incredible amount from her father and about the industry. I think Triple H has learned and developed an incredible instinct about the business and is learning some of the nuanced talent that someone like Vince McMahon has brought to the table. I think that's why Vince McMahon has positioned Triple H the way he has, based on what I've read, and given Triple H the opportunity to become a part of so many different aspects of what WWE has become, so that when that time comes, that they're not learning on the job. They've been doing the job for a long period of time. So, look, Vince McMahon is a unique animal, just like Steven Spielberg is a unique animal. There are certain people that bring such an intangible level of talent and instinct and intuitiveness to their product, whether it's a film or a television series or a book or music, that age doesn't really matter. Mick Jagger, for crying out loud, is still out there to this day. I just saw a clip of him in concert.
Oh my God!
With Taylor Swift singing "I Can't Get No Satisfaction." I don't think his age has anything to do with his ability to perform. But, you know, with regard to Vince McMahon, I think he's done a phenomenal job of building not only an empire, but building the people around him that need to see that empire exist well into the future. So I think they're well positioned. That's my short answer. They're very, very well positioned.
Well, Eric, I have to say that
thank you, Eric.
that Taylor Swift reference that you pulled up, I'm sure that right now, after NSC Gameboy and myself going to Los Angeles, we're pretty much questioning Taylor Swift's fame and pretty much tired of it. We just saw like everything about Taylor Swift in a museum that not even 10 years into the career.
At the Grammy, we went to the Grammy Museum in L.A. We had some business out L.A. and we went to the Grammy Museum, and and for the folks at home, I know this don't have anything to do with wrestling, but I'm a big musician. I'm a big fan. Tech himself plays bass guitar. He's a big musician himself, and you know, to go there and see the elements of everything is the ambiance of the culture, and you know, just the diversity of music over the years. It was a very wonderful experience. And as we were leaving the last floor, because you go up and you go down, the way that the museum is built, they had the Taylor Swift experience.
Oh,
and
God.
When you said that comment, that's probably what triggered it. We was sitting there, and I mean, they had everything Taylor Swift. Like, I'm pretty sure they had her blood type and probably her first pet somewhere, and the like, it was just like everything. And you know, now I'm not knocking Taylor Swift. If any Taylor Swift fans or any of her people listening, you know, this ain't a knock on her. You know, I'm pretty sure she's a well and there artist and very good at what she does. It was just that being there in that atmosphere was just kind of weird. But you know, I guess when you're as good as you are, then you know people are going to resonate with it very, very well. And if her having a spot in that museum, she must be doing something right. But as I speak on the museum, a long time ago on our show, we spoke about the WWE opening up a museum. And I wanted to ask your thoughts. Of course, we have the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fames and stuff. We have the Pro Wrestling Museum and everything. But if they had a WWE-like museum, and with them acquiring the rights to ECW and WCW and you know all the other promotions and stuff that they have under them, do you think that maybe you know them having that type of museum, and with you being in you know production and you being pretty much the forefront in both ends of you know running a company and help running a company and everything, do you think that the WWE could sustain and probably build a museum? Do you think the fans will want to go see that? Because with the network, you know, of course people can go see the past, and we all love the past and everything. But a museum is a word that really doesn't resonate with this generation. With Google and iPhones and Androids and stuff, everybody can just go on their phone and see it. So do you think that would probably be a marketable idea?
I do. I say this especially because of the presence that WWE now has in, you know, Florida, not too far from Orlando. I think if because there's so many tourists in Florida anyway, I mean it's a big destination, and it's tourists from all over the world. And you know, WWE is such a big international brand with so many fans from all over the world. Many of them that come to Florida to vacation and go see other things. But I do think that there is a physical museum, perhaps in conjunction with the Hall of Fame or not, but somehow as a part of the Performance Center, or at least adjacent to it. I do think, because look, seeing something in person, being able to walk up and see in 3 dimension, just inches away or a couple feet away, for example, the flare the robe that Ric Flair wore in his retirement match, or Andre the Giant's boots, or a Hulk Hogan boa, or Stone Cold Steve Austin crushed beer can, or whatever. To see those things in person is an entirely different experience than Googling it on your phone. And I do think people would come and just want to experience that. And there's a lot of other multimedia type of things that would go along with that would be more than just looking at physical things. It would be an opportunity to kind of immerse yourself in a lot of experiences from a video point of view that you might not be able to find on Google.
Thank you for that. The question is, Eric, is about the museum. If they had an Eric Bischoff experience, what would be in it?
Lots of black clothes.
It would be loud, obnoxious, and arrogant.
Like, what props would be in there? Like, shouldn't say a lot of black clothes. What would you put in there? Your black jacket, or?
I'd probably set on a jacket. I don't have a lot of stuff. I don't believe in keeping memorabilia. I just don't have it. I never kept any of my stuff. I don't collect memorabilia. It kind of, I guess, is consistent with my belief that I just don't think about the past too much. I kind of live for today and try to prepare for tomorrow, but I don't dwell on the past, so I don't keep a lot of stuff. I guess I could be talked out of donating my leather jacket, and depending on how prominent this display was, I might even give him my NWO chopper. But other than that, I really don't have anything that would be museum worthy.
Well, actually, for the music, for your Eric Bischoff Experience music of the exhibit, you can have that generic background NWO house music that he played.
Yeah, the music he had in WCW.
Yeah, you know what else I could do is I could actually tell everybody what they're going to see before they actually see it, and tell them whether they're staying or not.
Have Tony Schiavone on the loudspeaker.
You can just have a video of me standing at the entrance of the museum, giving away everything that's inside of the museum, and telling them to go down the street.
Speaking of that, Eric, I don't know if you ever been asked this. I'm gonna ask this: is the commentary. Of course, I was a fan of the Nitro, Schiavone, the great Bobby Heenan, and then of course you had Mike Tenay, or you had Larry Sabisco, good buddy of ours, by the way, or mixed and matched and flipped, great late Dusty Rhodes. Eric, were you a fan of Tony Schiavone and Heenan, their whole commentary crew, and how would you compare it to WWE when you went to the Jim Ross and the Jerry the King Lawler?
I liked Schiavone and Heenan together for a lot of reasons, and for the majority of the time that they worked together. There were times then that I got a little frustrated with the tone and some of the banter back and forth and so forth. But that that's going to happen. That's just part of television. Not everything is going to be exactly the way I would want it, or Vince McMahon would want it, or Paul Heyman would want it. But for the most part, I thought that Tony and Bobby did a phenomenal job. I've always been a huge fan of Bobby Heenan's work. Always.
Yeah.
And Schiavone, Schiavone's role was a tough one because Bobby was a handful. Tony's job was to kind of manage the process and be the traffic cop, if you will, and keep things going and flowing the way they needed to throughout the show. And then you have a guy like Bobby Heenan who's so amazingly talented and was so gifted at just seizing the moment and being spontaneous and being witty and entertaining at the same time, that made Tony's job pretty difficult at times. Rightfully so, be that way. But for the most part, to answer your question, I really enjoyed it. And I can't make a comparison to the WWE team because there were two different personalities that were trying to achieve two different, types of goals. So I think it's an unfair comparison. There were both sets of announcers were phenomenal, but they were different because they were forced or asked to achieve different things.
Now, and I'll ask this before we bring in some more callers. What were your thoughts on Jesse Ventura? I know, I don't know if anybody's ever asked you this. I know some people mentioned him. They mentioned mentioned me to ask this to you. I know you were there in WCW in the early years when he was there. Then, of course, he left. Were you a fan of Ventura's work at all? Were you a fan of his commentary work and his in-ring work? What's your thoughts on him?
I always enjoyed Jesse's work. When I was, in Minneapolis when he was in AWA, huge fan of him there. Listening to him in WWF when he was there, definitely big fan of him there. And I was a big fan of him in WCW. I thought when he first got there, he brought a tremendous amount of value to WCW. So I thought very, very highly of him in terms of his actual work on camera.
Thank you for that. Then we got Minnesota. Bringing a caller from Minnesota. Welcome to Under the Mat Radio with Eric Bischoff.
Eric Bischoff.
How are you?
How are you? Michael Paul calling from Minneapolis. I've always wanted to ask you, now that you have been away from this for a while, would you ever consider starting your own company and getting back into the Monday Night War thing with Vince?
No. No, I would not. I'm really happy doing what I'm doing. My partner Jason Hervey and I have Bischoff Hervey Entertainment, and we're producing shows. I get to be involved in that creative process. I get to be out meeting with network executives and heads of networks, pitching shows and developing shows. So I'm pretty content doing what I'm doing, and would not want to walk away from that. Certainly, I don't believe that another wrestling company, in the traditional sense of the word, stands an ice cube chance in hell of being successful in today's environment. I just don't. And I wouldn't put any of my calories into trying to achieve that level of success, of creating a company, especially competing on a Monday night and competing against WWE. It would be foolish to even...
Well, Eric, I just want you to know I was a huge fan of Monday Nitro, and I wish you the best in everything you do.
Thank you. It's kind of you to say. But, one thing I'm going to add to that as you go, the conditions, the environment back when we were able to launch Nitro was so different than it is today. And that's what allowed Nitro to be successful. Those same conditions and that same environment in today's television landscape just doesn't exist, and that's why I would be so reticent to even attempt it.
Thank you, Minnesota. Right. Thank you for that. Speaking of that real quick, Eric, you said conditions in Nitro was different back then and now. If Nitro came out now, you have not been able to give away any of the taped Raw, any of the Raw results, because you had the internet now exposed it already. So you can, give away any of the results, because now people go online and, Raw's taped or this show's taped. They look up spoiler alerts for TNA or Global Force or Raw. So that kind of takes away that gritty feel you had back then as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that are different, but most importantly, just the business of the television business is different. It would take such a massive investment of dollars and commitment to a schedule to even create a wrestling program in the traditional sense of the word, like the format that we would see in a Raw or SmackDown or, the TNA is trying to do, Ring of Honor is trying to do. In order for anybody to compete with WWE, and to do it realistically and to make a serious run at that would require so much money and such a large commitment from a television partner that it would be impossible today. No one would make that kind of a commitment. Television networks wouldn't make that kind of a commitment. The amount of money that it would require would be extremely difficult to try to get people to invest in nowadays. So I don't see it. Now, there may be another way to do it, and I'm all about that. I'm all about creating another opportunity that's different than what we're currently seeing in WWE or TNA or Ring of Honor or anybody else that's trying to produce a weekly wrestling show that looks similar in some respects to WWE, but unless somebody comes up with a whole new approach and something that feels entirely different, that doesn't take hundreds of millions of dollars and a 2-year commitment from a network, unless somebody comes up with that solution, I don't see it happening.
Wow. Okay, I appreciate that. Speaking to Jason Hervey, we tend to remember, I'm not sure what year this is, back in WCW when Paul Heyman confronted Jason Hervey, a young 4-kid Jason Hervey. What's your memories of that, Bischoff? And is it funny seeing your business partner that you're close with now and looking back at him back in the days when he was such of a fan of so young?
Yeah, I mean, it is funny, and we joke about it all the time. And I think that storyline that played out with him and Heyman, I think that might have actually occurred before I even got there, or perhaps shortly thereafter. But yeah, it's Jason's been a wrestling fan all his life. He grew up in Los Angeles. You know, he and his dad and his brother would watch wrestling on Saturday mornings in Los Angeles, and they'd go to the arena when wrestling came to town and watch the live events. So, Jason's involvement in wrestling started at a very, very, very early age.
Thank you for that. We got another caller from, we got a bunch of people. Newark, New Jersey. Welcome to Sons of the Merit Radio with Eric Bischoff. Newark, are you there?
Yeah.
Yes, welcome with Eric Bischoff.
Thank you. How you doing, Eric Bischoff?
I'm doing very well. By the way, I know this is going to sound funny to a lot of people, but I really dig Newark.
Okay. I have a quick question for. I could ask you a lot of questions, but let me ask you one question. Why did you pick wrestling other than any other business? In terms of enrolling into wrestling businesses, probably could have tried something else, but why wrestling?
I didn't pick wrestling. It just kind of happened. It was really, I've told the story before on the show, so I don't want to tell it again, but it was really a question of me just being in the right place at the right time and the right opportunity, much more than it was me deciding, okay, I'm going to get in the wrestling business. It didn't happen that way. It was a very spontaneous, opportunistic, amount of good fortune, more than it was a decision.
Thank you. You have any more questions?
Yeah, I have one other last question. What's the difference between working with WWE and TNA? You've been part of both of the companies.
There is no comparison, and I can't even come up with a reasonable analogy. So I'm going to let that one pass. But it's two different planets.
All right. Thank you for calling, Nort. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Go ahead, Shin-Blade.
I have a question. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Shin. Oh, well, I wanted to have a question. This is just really, once again, your opinion. What would you prefer if you were going back to your days at WCW? What would you prefer? Would you prefer a great booker, or would you prefer a Hollywood writer to do your show? Would you prefer a great wrestling booker or a great Hollywood writer to do your show?
Both. Look, and I'm assuming a lot now. I'm assuming when you say a wrestling booker, because I think that term actually is so outdated and really doesn't apply to anybody who's relevant in the business anymore in a large way. Television, wrestling bookers, as you put it, from back in the 60s and the 70s, and some of them who survived into the 80s, their creative process kind of evolved around what worked in a weekly or, in some cases, monthly territory environment. That's the way they grew up. That's the way their business operated. That is the business model that they operated in, and consequently, that's the way they thought. In today's environment, because competition is, you can't argue with how much more intense and sophisticated the competition is today for any television product than it was back in the 60s and the 70s and the early 80s. And I think because of that competition, and because audiences are always sampling and comparing one program to another, today's environment would require that someone that was going to be successful for any length of time as a creative person, especially a top creative person in the wrestling business, would have to have a Hollywood type of understanding of story structure, and not just to talk about it in the meeting and throw out the buzzwords. I mean, somebody that really had developed the talent and the understanding and the discipline of how to create a great storyline arc over a period of time. You would have to have that, and you can't find that in traditional wrestling bookers. Traditional wrestling people just have never had to really understand or develop the skill and the discipline to think like someone who writes for episodic television. Conversely, it would that person, that magic person, would also have to have a really strong knowledge of the wrestling product, and more importantly than that, of the wrestling audience. And I've sat in meetings with people who say they were involved in this organization and that organization and take credit for a lot of things, who, quite frankly, didn't learn even the most fundamental things about the creative process. I've listened to them all, used the buzzwords, but if you don't understand the psychology of storytelling that pertains specifically to the wrestling audience or sports entertainment audience, depending on which camp you live in, if you don't understand and really have an honest, good feel and instinct for that psychology, along with the discipline of great story architecture that you would find in Hollywood, for example, it takes a combination of those two things. There's no one person. It could never be an either-or in today's environment. It would have to be that one special person that understood the psychology from a wrestler's point of view and a wrestling fan's point of view, more importantly, along with disciplined storyline development and architecture. That's the ideal person. And that ideal person would be extremely difficult to find, by the way.
Thank you very much, Eric. A lot of fans have asked me about this question, and I've always tried to tell them, the next time we get Bischoff, I wanted to ask him, because when you're doing television, and especially episodic television, like you were doing with Nitro, and a lot of these people who are in the independents and stuff, they always be like, I wish they have better bookers. But when you're booking, you don't think about you're on television. When you're on television, you have to present the product in a whole different type of light, because this ain't like back in the day when, you had the territory days when you was on local access television, wrestling and everything. Now you're on cable television. You have sponsors who's watching it. You have the fans, of course, who's watching it. But then you have some fans who really just like the story. They like the stories. They really don't care too much about the wrestling. The wrestling is okay or good or mediocre or bad, whatever way they want to put it. But it's mostly the fact that they like to see good stories. And I always wanted to ask you that. I'm glad that you put it in the perspective that you did, and I thank you, because I agree with you. I think that someone needs to have both, because you're talking about a realm that a lot of these fans probably would never understand, because they're not on television. You're not on TV. You're not producing a show. You don't understand. You go to a wrestling show, you buy a ticket, you watch, and then you go home. But when you're doing a show, there's a whole bunch of things that go on in the workings, and you just don't know. So thanks again for covering that.
You bet. Good question. Thank you.
Go ahead, Shane.
Actually, Eric, I want to thank you for being on the show. It's been a great trilogy so far. I think NSC Gameboy's question beat mine, because honestly, I was going to ask you what was better in comparison, scripted promos or promos with bullet points?
I'm sorry, I had a hard time hearing that one. Could you try that again?
Oh, the question was scripted promos or bullet points.
Well, I think I've said this before, and if I haven't, made it clear, I'll try to do it again. And again, this is personal, okay? Just because it's the way I think or what I like doesn't mean it's the best thing for everybody else. But personally, as a performer, please don't give me a script. Please just tell me the emotion you want to achieve and the outcome from a storyline perspective. Tell me what you want and let me feel my way there. Let me feel the audience. Let me read the guy or the girl or whomever I'm in the ring with. Let me feel it and improv it, because it will be more real and more organic and therefore more believable. And that's partly because I'm not an actor. I think I'm a pretty decent performer inside of a ring, specifically in our industry, and I think I can read a crowd, and I think I understand from a storyline point of view where someone would want to go and the outcome that they would want. So if I have a clear picture of where I want to be, I'm very, very confident in my own ability, as well as the ability of certain other people to get there without a script. The problem for me with scripted promos and too much scripting is that it requires that the people that are performing that script become really pretty good actors. And that's a lot harder to achieve than people think. So I tend to prefer organic, kind of natural, unscripted opportunities. Bullet points are fine, but the minute somebody's starting to remember word for word what they're supposed to deliver, they're spending so much time thinking about the words they're supposed to be saying that they forget to evoke the right emotion. And then you end up losing the feel. You end up losing the connectivity to the audience because you're so worried about memorizing the lines and delivering the lines exactly the way they're written that you're not paying attention to whether or not the crowd is paying attention to you or reacting the way you want them to react. And that's the most important thing.
It definitely is. And we thank you.
Honestly, guys, not to beat this up, but it's why so many television actors and film actors could never perform on Broadway, because that's a whole different skill. Being out there in front of a live crowd and creating drama and creating emotion, telling a story in front of a live audience is an entirely different skill set than delivering lines on a movie set or on a television set. And by the way, one isn't better or worse than the other. They're just completely different. And I think that's the magic of sports entertainment and wrestling, is that the stars, the Stone Cold Steve Austins, the Hulk Hogan's, the Ric Flairs, the Rocks, the John Cena's, you name them. The guys who are at the very top of the top have developed that skill. And it's such a unique talent that's why it's successful. But when you start trying to transplant somebody who's really good, for example, on a movie set or on a television set, and then stick them, on Broadway, doesn't usually work that well.
Yeah, see different dynamics.
Yep.
Yeah.
Totally different dynamics. Well, Bischoff, is about that time. Sad to say time is running short. And it's been an honor again to have you on the show for part 3.
The trilogy.
With you. The trilogy. Will there be a part 4? We definitely will let you know down the line in the feature. Bischoff, any last words before we let you go?
Hey, you guys might want to check out WWE Network. That was all over it last week. So I think we got some replays going this week. Check it out. It's been a lot of fun doing it.
Yes, we definitely will. I definitely loved your work on WWE Network. Bischoff, please give a shout out to Mrs. Bischoff, your dog, and your Harley Davidsons, and your bear. Sitting on the bed for us, and look forward to have you on sometime in the future again. We definitely let you know.
Hey man, love to do it again. You guys just let me know. You got my number.
All right, man. Thank you much.
Thank you, Bischoff. Thank you, Eric. Take care, man.
Thank you. Everybody, that was Eric Bischoff. The great one.
Trilogy. It's close.
Trilogy. The Boss Hoss. Easy E. Thank you all for all the fans, the many fans that's called in, all the fans that tweeted, that texted us, that Facebooked us. For NSC Gameboy, this is Tack, Sensational One, Shin-Blade, Saltine, African Queen, LSR, Ghetto Tony, everybody representing. Thank you all much. Shout out real quick to you once again, the Graham Cawthorn for the great book, The Battleground Baltimore, How One Arena Changed Wrestling History. Please check it out on Amazon.com. Thank you all. Thank you, NSC Gameboy Shin, doing a great job in L.A. We'll be back next week, live Tuesday nights. We will have former WCW and NWA ring announcer Dave Penza, and we also will have our good old buddy, famous movie critic Brad Jones, and what's known as the Cinema Snob. So we're about to roll out. Shout out to all our Empire fans. I know you're about to go watch it. We got work to do. We'll talk to you next week.
Meet your local Organic Valley farmer at our Farm Discovery on Saturday, October 10th. You're invited for a day of family fun on the farm in Jefferson, Maryland. Meet the Holters, one of the 492 Organic Valley farming families here in the Northeast. Join us for a farm tour, meet the cows, make some butter, and enjoy a tasty organic picnic. Reserve your Farm Discovery spot for free today at organicvalley.coop and join us from 10 to 3 on Saturday, October 10th. Organic Valley, bringing the good.